Okay, I'm David Desannoy. Was born on the 26th of March, 1948. Born in the Sudan Hospital. I attended the Tower-Soudan High School, graduated there in 1966. From there I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point and graduated from there in 1970. So I'll be covering more of my career later on. But as far as my core family growing up, I had, there was my dad, David Sr., my mother, Marianne, was a Gornick from Ely, and then my brother and sister, Michael and Diane. I had grandparents, Joseph and Ambrosine Desannoy, and they were from Tower, and my grandfather and grandmother from Ely were Anton and Mary Gornick. So, my present family, I have 3 kids, 3 girls, Danielle, Caitlin, and Brittany. Danielle is 40, Caitlin's 38, and Brittany is 31. Danielle's out in Eugene, Oregon. She's a federal probation officer there and kind of specializes in sexual deviance, so I hear quite a few good stories from her. Caitlin is in Boise, Idaho. Her husband Tim, they got married in Yellowstone, I don't know, let's see, 6-7 years ago. And they have two kids, 2 of my grandkids. Everett is 3 and Eliza is 5, so they're a lot of work. So that's my present family. My career, as I mentioned earlier, I graduated from the Military Academy at West Point in 1970. From there I went to, I had a 30-day leave in June, and in July I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, went to Airborne Ranger School. Ranger School was 3 phases, about 3 weeks and 2 to 3 weeks in Fort Benning, where you learn military tactics. Then we went up to the mountains in Dahlonega, Georgia for 3 weeks and rappelled out of helicopters and scaled mountains and did stuff like that. And small unit tactics were basically every day we planned a mission and then every night we executed it, culminating in the morning where we took the objective. Anyway, we didn't get much sleep during that phase, and sometimes you'd be wandering around in the woods at night, and then you'd be running into trees, or else when the line started going, you'd be sleeping standing up. So it was a challenging time. You learned a lot about yourself. The 3rd phase was at Eglin Air Base in Florida, and that was basically a jungle swamp phase. Basically, that was in preparation, for jungle warfare in Vietnam. So I went through that and got done with those 3 phases. And after that, I left Fort Benning. I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and for the Signal Officers Basic Course, I was in the Signal Corps branch of the Army. From there I went to the 82nd Airborne Division and went to the 82nd Signal Battalion, which supported the 82nd Division. There I also became a jump master, which was, you're basically in charge of a bunch of guys jumping out of an airplane, making sure everybody got out. If they didn't get out, you usually had to kick them out or shove them out. And that happened on a few occasions. After about 10 or 11 months there, I went to Vietnam. I had chosen Vietnam when I graduated, basically because I was picking the assignments at the end of the thing, and not much was left except Vietnam. So I said, well, what the heck, I'll go to Vietnam. I was supposed to go with the Americal division, but when I got over there, the Americal division had already deployed back to the States, so I went to our group commander, and he asked me where I wanted to go. I told him, well, I don't know where to go. He put me anywhere you want me to. So he assigned me down to Tan Son Nhut Air Base, Camp Gaylor. We had a signal battalion there, which kind of supported the Army in that area. So we went, I was down at Camp Gaylor there for 363 days. Everybody said, oh, you'll only be here 6 months because the war's winding down. Well, I stayed to the end. As a matter of fact, I carried the battalion colors back to Fort Ord, California. After Vietnam, I had various assignments in the States. First one was at Fort Holabird, Maryland, where I was with a signal support unit for the intelligence command. From there, I went to Fort Meade and Fort Leavenworth. I was with combat developments in Fort Leavenworth. Went over to Germany, spent 3 years there, and worked again with the communications, strategic communications. Basically, we had the digital microwave network for NATO, which covered, Western Europe and down to Italy and Greece. From there, I came back. I went to the Fort Belvoir, attended the Defense Management program, Defense System Management College, and learned how to become a program manager. From there, I went to Fort Belvoir, supporting the Special Operations Forces, and my last assignment was at the Pentagon, where I spent 3 or 4 years in the Army Operations Center supporting the Special Operations Forces, which was a very interesting and rewarding assignment. I retired in 1992, came back to Minnesota because I thought it was a good place to raise kids. So I got back in 1992. Things had changed a little bit by then. So I always wanted to be a bus driver because I used to go to school when I was growing up, and in the wintertime I'd see the buses come in, and Jack Burgess was always the first one in there, and he'd open a door and he'd be in there and he'd be laughing, smiling, and it was nice and warm in there. I was freezing outside, and all the kids got off the bus, and I said, when I get out of the Army, I want to be a bus driver. So that's what I ended up doing. I was a bus driver for about 13 years, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the kids. I tried to be a mentor to them. I mean, they were a rough bunch at that time. There was no respect, especially in the school. The teachers, they didn't have any control over the kids. It was really kind of disappointing, but you try to do your best. I mean, I'll interject a story right here. I was bus driving. There was one little kid. And I was lined up for my bus, waiting to take the kids off. And there's one little kid out there with a stick. He was eating other kids. So I went out there and I said, hey, quit that. He wouldn't quit. So finally I says, okay, get up to see the principal. So, he walked up there. So anyway, I went on my route and I came back and I was walking home. And happened to be that this little kid was renting a place 2 doors up from me. So when I was going out there, or going back home, his father comes out, and I said, well, I was thinking, he's probably gonna, apologize for his kid's actions. No, he was ready to beat me up. So we had this staring thing and face-to-face thing in the neighborhood. The neighbor, Ryan Dale, he was out there. He saw that. He runs inside the house, and he tells his mother, "They're going to kill Dave. They're going to kill Dave." And so anyway, there was a bunch of macho stuff going back and forth between me and this kid. But, I mean, nothing ever happened. And so anyway, that was a story about bus driving. But there's a lot of other stories. I used to have to stop on the highway and pull over on the side and discipline kids or whatever. And usually, you know, I tried to have pretty good control of the kids. A lot of the kids some of them I see now, some of them, you know, have really done good. A lot of them, not so good. But anyway, so I did that for 13 years, and at the same time, I was working a gravel pit with my, you know, for my father. When I initially retired out of the Army, I was looking for a job down in the Twin Cities area in defense contracting, because I did a lot of work with civilian contractors while in the Army. So I was looking at, there was control data was down there, but that never panned out. And so I went back and started working for my dad. And I'm still doing that more or less today. I haven't done it in a couple of years because all the equipment broke down, and now in the process of fixing it all. So anyway, yeah, so then I did I worked in the gravel business. So that basically I had three careers: the military, bus driving, and then the gravel pit.
Which one do you feel you connected to most?
I tell you, they all had good points, but I always wanted to be an engineer and work civil engineering. And that's at the academy. I wanted to go to the Corps of Engineers, but my ranking in class wasn't high enough, and there was only a limited number of slots in that branch. Most of the slots went to combat arms, infantry, artillery, air defense artillery, and stuff like that. So I ended up going to with Signal Corps, because they had a engineering branch, and I was hoping to get into that, but I never did. So I guess the most rewarding job I had was working in a gravel pit, and I still like just going up there now and just putzing around. And so I guess that would have been my most rewarding, but I enjoyed, you know, each of the careers. Okay, yeah, my family came to, the Desannoy family came to the States in 1888, and that was my, I guess, great-great-grandfather or something, and his wife, Aline, and my grandfather, Joseph, they came in 1888. Joseph was 15 years old, and around 1900, he went back to France, and he was going to marry this gal, but she had already gotten married to somebody else, so he ended up marrying Ambrosine. So, and then him and Ambrosine came back to Tower in 1901. They came from an area of France, which is in northern French, and it was a coal mining area. So when they first came over to the States, they stayed in LaSalle County, Illinois for a while, and then they moved to Minnesota. And I don't know if he was looking to get into the mines up here or not, but he ended up getting into the lumber business. They homesteaded some acreage up north of Cook in that area. So it was, he never worked in the mines, but he was working in the lumber business quite a bit. And so, okay, now my dad, when he got out of was in World War II. He was with the 330th Bomber Group, and he did a bunch of training in the States, and then they spent some time in Guam. But then he also spent time at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. And that's where he met all these girls. Anyway, he he went there, and then finally in 1946, January 1946, he got out of the service and came back to Tower. And at that time, he was looking around, and later that year, he bought the service station from Dave Anderson. During that time, the University of Missouri called him up and said, "Hey, you want to come back and finish your degree?" Well, he was seeing my mother at that time, so he opted out of that, which was something he always regretted, but he didn't regret it because he married my mother. He regretted it because he didn't get the education. And that was one thing he said. He told all his kids, you're going to college. And we all did. And we all, turned out pretty well. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, so he got the garage. Back then it was, business says it was kind of tough making a living in it. And so he got in a bunch of other stuff. He used to cut timber and haul pulpwood and sell the pulpwood and cedar and all of that stuff. He had a coal business where the trains would come in with a load of coal, and I'd have to go down there, empty the car, and then deliver to the people. Because coal was very big in the 50s and 60s, and I remember shoveling coal a lot in the fall and the winter time, and crawling in those coal bins, and you'd come out and it'd be all black. And but anyway, that was one of the things. And he was having, there was 3 or 4 other garages in town, so he was having a kind of struggling. And he always told me, he says, if it wasn't for the Finlanders and Embarrass, he says, I never would have made it. So a lot of his friends were from Embarrass, so he spent a lot of time with them. He also, I remember peeling pulpwood when I was a kid. We'd be splitting wood, and I'd be piling wood because he'd be selling that. He bought a sod machine, and which didn't pan out too good. We cut the sod at the cabin we had on Lake Vermilion. We put the sod in, and that was the only thing he did with that sod machine. So that wasn't a good adventure. The gravel pit. He also started the gravel pit in the early 50s and that. And at first he didn't have a pit per se. Trocano's outside of Tower, they had a gravel pit there, which everybody kind of used, for hauling gravel and doing stuff like that. I remember one time one of the other gravel, my Uncle George also worked for my dad, and he basically ran a gravel business. But at this Trocano's pit, he was piling a pile of rocks for, they use that for not landscaping, but cribs or something like that. So and he had a pretty good pile of rocks, and he came back one day, and the pile was gone. So my dad went over to the competitor, and he says, "Well, what the heck? You knew that was our rock pile." He says, "Why'd you take the rocks out of there?" And the guy says, "Well," he says, "you should have put a sign in that." And my dad says, "Well, he would have took that too." So that was that. But I got a lot of good stories about the gravel pit, which I will kind of cover a little later. Like I say, we're working out at Trocano's pit, and I think Carlin had a pit, which KGM has it now, but they had a pit there, and we'd haul out of there. And finally he got his own gravel pit. He bought it up on 1977, up on the Highway 77. That was in the early 50s, and that was the major pit that we had, and he developed that, and that's where I work out of today. He had two other gravel pits, one on Highway 35 right outside of Tower. We no longer have that. I sold some of the land to Rolando Noyes and some to Eric Norberg and some to Minnesota Power, so all that was taken care of. And then I had some, he also had a gravel pit on Highway 1 going to Cook, right past the Lost Lake Road on Highway 1. Anyway, he had 80 acres there, and he got that when he came out of World War II because it was a relative of the family had that, and I guess it was up for tax forfeit or something, so he applied for that, and so he got those 40 acres or 80 acres. And we developed that a little bit, not too much in the gravel pit, but he used to spend a lot of time out there. As a matter of fact, he spent time at all these things, kept them, you know, the wood cut, and he just took care of them all. But when I got him, I couldn't keep care. I mean, there's two. I don't know how in the heck he did it, but I couldn't take care of it all. So I ended up, selling that, the 80 acres there too, to some other guy who wanted it for hunting, and there was other people who had worked for my dad. My dad, he was a generous man and compassionate, but he was also hard. I mean, if he liked you, he liked you, and if he didn't, he didn't, and he told it like it was. But anyway, Terry Anderson, Super Dave's father, he had a trailer out there, and he'd go deer hunting, and Super Dave, I think, has been out there quite a few times hunting in there. But and also, Terry Anderson, Dave's dad, he worked for my dad a lot, and supposedly, I don't know what my dad told me. I never verified this with Terry, but my dad said, well, Dave was named after him. So I said, well, okay. Anyway, other people who worked in the family business, Sonny Brula, Frank Brula, we used to call him Sonny when we were growing up. I don't know. I think he didn't like that name Sonny, so he changed. His real name was Frank anyway. So he used to work there. Ernie Moostonen used to work for my dad, hauling gravel. My brother Mick, and like I mentioned before, my Uncle George, who basically ran the gravel pit. Yes, some of the stories. Those guys back then were characters. I mean, my dad, he always had a bottle of Petri brandy at the shop, and the old timers would come in there, and especially in the evening before they went home to dinner, and they'd he'd give them a shot of brandy, and they'd all be sitting there drinking and that, and then getting up and wobbling home or wherever they went. And so that was sort of a ritual. If kids came in there with their parents, my dad always gave them a bottle of pop or some candy or something. So he just liked kids, and and like I say, there were really characters there. Jack Luxo, he had the West End Market right across the street, and the guys in the garage, they'd always kind of look out for Jack, and he used to lock up the store around 5, 6 o'clock or whatever. I don't know what time it was, but they'd all be sitting there. And Jack, he was a very kind of meticulous guy, kind of funny too. You'd go in there and ask for toilet paper, and he'd say, well, what do you want, the tear-proof or the non-skid? So, Jack he'd kind of slowly come out, and he'd put the key in the door, and he'd lock it, and they were at the garage, and then they'd dial a number of the West End Market, and Jack would be sitting there with that key, and finally, he went back inside, and he goes in. As soon as he picked up the phone, they'd hang up, and they were all over at the garage laughing, like, laughing. So anyway, after about 3 or 4 times of doing this, Jack finally gave up and left. But that was, they'd always be in the garage and they'd be, talking about stuff, and guys would come in and they'd be, my dad would be working, and they, one guy came in, Purvis. I don't think I ever met the guy, but I guess the old timers knew the guy Purvis. Anyway, he came in there and they were talking about turkey vultures, and Purvis said, "Geez, I've never seen a turkey vulture." And my dad says, "Well, here, I got a picture of one." So he hands him a mirror, and Purvis looks at that, and he got mad, and he walked out. It was months before he came back. Oh, and then all the old timers used to play cribbage in there. And my dad, in the office area there was a glass display case between the parts, where he had the parts, so he could walk behind and get parts. Well, these guys would be playing cribbage. There'd be 4, 5, 6 of them playing cribbage. As a matter of fact, that's where I learned how to play cribbage. Nobody taught me. I just watched them all the time. And that's how I learned to play cribbage. But anyway, eventually, it got too much, so my dad cut down or moved the display cabinet to the other side and shortened it up. So that was the end of the cribbage playing there. Like I mentioned before, my dad was, he was a caring individual. He was tough, but he was really caring. And back then, most people charged their whatever they got at the gas station, gas, oil changes, repairs, whatever they charge. And then at the end of the month, they'd come in there and they'd pay some. So one Christmas, this one guy came in. I don't know who in the heck it was, but he came in and he told my dad, he says, Christmas is coming up, and I need money to buy my kids presents, and I don't think I'll be able to pay this month. And Dave Anderson, who we bought the garage for, he spent a lot of time tinkering around. Anyway, he asked the guy, he says, "Dave, do you have kids?" And my dad said, "Yeah, I have 3 kids." And he says, "You want to buy your kids Christmas presents?" My dad says, "Well, yeah, I don't buy them Christmas presents." So he turns to the guy and he says, "Put some money on a bill." So he I don't know what he paid, but at least he paid. But my dad was, he was, like I said, he was a generous and compassionate guy. Well, there was another time I remember at the garage, Terry Anderson, I said before, he used to work there. So he was at the garage, and this was in the fall, and every fall for homecoming was a big deal, back then. And for homecoming, there were parades, all the classes had floats, and the band marched down the street. And the night before this was the night before the big game, and they had a bonfire, and it was down there by the cemetery on where the county, or where the city garage is now, and there's a big kind of gravel pit there. That's also where they did sled races in the winter. But anyway, in October, everybody go in there, and it'd be pretty big. It'd be 30, 40, 50 feet tall. And at the top, there was always an outhouse. They always put an outhouse on the top. And, the night before, everybody come out there, and the band was out there, and they were cheering, and the team made speeches and all that good stuff. Well, one time, and I don't know whose class it was, but somebody set the bonfire a day early. They burnt the bonfire down, so it wasn't very the class that had that bonfire, that responsibility. They were very upset. So I remember Terry Anderson was working at the garage, and there was a bunch of high school students, because they thought he was the one who set the fire. So they came to the garage and, were giving them the 10th degree on questioning, and Terry, no, I didn't do it. It wasn't me, And anyway, they never did find out who did it, but I think I had a pretty good hunch that it was Terry and some other guys. So anyway, everybody lived through that, but so that was quite interesting. Anyway, that's about it. I don't know if you have any other questions that you want to ask me, or
What's the thing you remember most from Vietnam?
Well, I hate to say it, but I got a little reprimand over there. I used to hang out with the non-commissioned officers a lot, because to me, they're the backbone of the Army, and they're always partying for a good time. I had a great command sergeant major there. Anyway, we used to after work, or after the duty hours, they'd go over in their huts there, and we'd have a few drinks and that, and sometimes it got a little late. One time I was leaving the compound, and the battalion commander comes out there, and I didn't have my hat on. I looked kind of disheveled or whatever, and he asked me, well, I don't know what he asked me, but I was going across the street to Thompson Wood Air Base, because that's where my sleeping quarters were. Anyway, so the next day I come back, or get back on post, and the XO called me, and he says, battalion commander wrote up a letter of reprimand on you. So I said, oh crap, that's not good. So anyway, I went and told the sergeant major, and lo and behold, the letter of reprimand disappeared, and I was able to complete my service of 22 years. But there were some really good people over in Vietnam, and we weren't, we weren't on the battle lines. I knew a lot of people were. I lost a lot of West Point classmates in Vietnam, but we were in the back. They called us REMF, which stood for Rear Echelon MFers. So I was always a REMF. As a matter of fact, my buddy to this day still teases me about being a REMF, because he was marching through the rice paddies as an infantryman, and I respect that. And but like I say, the backbone of the military service is the non-commissioned officers, and I've learned more from non-commissioned officers than from anyone else in the service. This reminds me of another story. When I was at Fort Bragg, I was a platoon leader there, and I'd have to give physical PT every morning. We do exercises and then maybe go for a little run or whatever. So first time I went out there, I'd start doing jumping jacks or whatever in the heck it was. And with my Minnesota accent, I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So pretty soon the whole platoon is going 1, 2, 3. Pretty soon the platoon sergeant says, okay, you guys knock it off. So I had to kind of clean up my accent there for a little bit when I was given PT. So anyway, yeah. So like I say, and I had my platoon sergeant. I mean, they basically ran the thing. I mean, you were there in charge, and anybody screwed up, it was your fault. But it was the platoon sergeants, the E7s, the E8s, the E9s. Those were the guys who really run the Army. So.
Do you guys have any questions? Okay.
Yeah, I do. You know when you do the bonfire
Yeah.
the night before, and you go and get the outhouse? You always stole. We always stole
Oh yeah.
outhouses.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you remember any stories going as to where you found them?
No, I don't. I wasn't in charge of getting an outhouse, but yeah, I don't know where they got these outhouses from. I mean, they weren't new ones or anything, but they're probably somebody's outhouse. As a matter of fact, my grandmother, grandmother Desannoy, Ambrosine, she died at the age of 84, and she was still using an outhouse, and she had a well out in back of her house for water. The only thing she had in her house was electricity, which my dad put in there for her, and so she had a refrigerator. But she cooked on a wooden stove, and like I say, the couple of weeks before she passed at 84, she was up on the roof patching the shingles on there. I'm thinking, so my dad had to go up and drag her off of there. But
What year was that?
Pardon?
What year?
1966. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was at West Point then, and I remember they came and told me, they said, your family notified us that your grandmother died. Grandmother, she was very special to me anyway. We're out in formation. I was just a freshman or a plebe. So you're sitting on formation and at attention with your neck in and, staring straight ahead and getting harassed. So I was getting harassed by this upperclassman, and, I think I had a few tears in my eyes, and he said, asked me, what the heck's the matter with you? And, I told him, and he said, oh, okay, and he kind of let up then. But, so that was interesting. I didn't go home for the funeral. They asked me if I wanted to go home. I figured if I went home, I wouldn't come back because it was, I'd been there July, August, September, October, so 3 or 4 months. And I mean, it was pretty tough, but I made it through it because my dad always told me, he said, they're going to give you a bunch of crap, he says, but just remember that they went through the same thing. So so I think about that every night, in that first year, and that got me through. And but yeah, another interesting story. I got disciplined for. We used to have the whole corps would march on certain days, and then if it was raining or something, only a battalion or something would march. Anyway, we were marching in the central area, which was basically a kind of a quadrangle, and so we were marching there, and I came out there and I had my overshoes on because it was raining, and everybody said, geez, why are you wearing your overshoes? I said, well, my dad always says you wear your overshoes, you don't want to get your feet wet. Feet are important. So I was wearing my overshoes. Well, then they picked me to be the guidon, which you carry the doggone flag right on the right-hand side, right in front of the reviewing generals. So here I am. We're marching by there, and I'm marching by. Next, later on that evening, just, General Bernie, he saw you with your overshoes and he wrote you up. So I had to march 20 hours on the area for that. But yeah, I had another quick story about the first year. you sit at the tables, and you got to sit at attention. You got to look straight ahead. You can't, you can't turn your head or anything. Your eyes just are moving around like this. And there's 10 people at the table. So, and the plebes or us first year guys were, looking straight ahead. The upper class are joking around, monkeying around, everything else. But we're at the end of the table, and waiters come and they bring the food. So, and we had to memorize the menus every day. So anyway, the waiter comes and he gives the tray to the plebe on the end, and we'd have to hold it up like this and say, "Sir, the roast potatoes are on the table." And you pass it up the front. They take what they want, and then it comes down to you. Well, anyway, there's this one guy. He evidently didn't memorize the menu, so the waiter gives him some Brussels sprouts. So he picks it up, he looks at it, and he says, "Sir, the little cabbages are on the table." So that happened right after I was pegged for singing. A few weeks before that happened, the upperclassman at the table says, "Hey, Smackhead, you know any songs?" I couldn't think of any songs, so I said, the only thing that came to my mind was "Wild Thing" by the Trogs. So he says, "Okay, stand up and sing it." I'm thinking, so I stand up and say, "Wild thing, you make my heart sing, you make everything groovy." And he says, "Louder." So I was singing louder and louder, and all these tables around were sitting there laughing, and I felt like an idiot, but I had to do that for about 2 weeks at the table until the Brussels sprouts guy screwed up, and then it was his turn to take the heat.
How about in high school? Did you get into any trouble in high school? What were your high school years like in sports and academics and growing up in Tower?
I never got in any trouble. I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed math. I had great teachers, Hendrickson, Miller, which nobody liked. But I tell you what I learned from Miller helped me get through the first year of the academy. But anyway, I went out for football. I wasn't really athletic, but I was a big guy, and all your buddies are out for that. Oh yeah, I'll go out for that too. I mean, we had I don't know how many kids we had in high school, probably 100 or so in the whole high school. And you're picking, so I was in football, I went in basketball, was on I was the sixth man of the team, and I didn't get much play time, but it didn't bother me because I really wasn't a real good basketball player. Anyway, I mean, my 15 minutes of fame, I guess, came at the regional tournaments where I scored the first 3 points of the game. Of course, that was the only 3 points I scored during the whole tournament, but at least it was the first 3. Yeah, they passed me the ball. I went up to shoot it. Fortunately, it went in, but the guy clobbered me, knocked my glasses off, knocked me on the floor, so I got another free shot, and luckily I made that. So that's my first 3 points. So that was it. And
Dave, you also were in other things other than sports too, weren't you?
yeah, I was class officer. Can't remember what it was, and was in the I was in the band, and I was kind of a business manager of the yearbook with Faye Lampa. I think she was, yeah, I'm sure it was Faye. There was a bunch of others that were on it. But yeah, I mean, I had a great time in high school. I mean, it was great. That's why I wanted to come back here when I retired from the military. But like I said, it really changed. So.
Great, thanks,
Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah.
It's fun. About you.
Yeah.